Greetings from Cefer Publishing Group. I'm Dr. Stephen Pigeon, and welcome to another edition of Cefer Moments. Today we're going to discuss really something that kind of came to me that I think is critically important. And I not only find it important, but I think it's also kind of eye-opening as we talk about what is the narrow path as given to us in Scripture. We're going to begin with the passage that is set out in Matityahu, the Besora Matityahu, or the Gospel of Matthew, in chapter 19, verses 4 through 8. And allow me to read it to you. And he answered and said to them, Have ye not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female, and said, For this cause shall a man leave his father and mother, and shall cleave to his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. Wherefore they are no more two, but one flesh. What therefore Elohim has joined together, let not man put asunder. They said to him, Why did Moshe then command to give a writing of divorcement and to put her away? And he said to them, Moshe, because of the hardness of your hearts, suffered you to put away your wives. But from the beginning, it was not so. Now, what is this here? From the beginning, it was not so. Here, the Torah of Moshe stands corrected. There are actually three premises that are set forth in this passage. But before we get to those premises, I want to share with you just a couple of things in review of some of the things we talked about before. Remember that Moshe then commanded to give a writing of divorcement, or a sefer of divorcement. Now this writing or sefer of divorcement is called an apostasion in the Greek, which is the masculine form of apostasia, which means falling away or breaking wedlock, revolting, desisting, going away. And it's a very important concept when we talk about what we found in 2 Thessalonians 2. But here you have Mashiach saying, well, look, in the beginning, this command was not so. This certificate of divorcement, this apostasion, was not so. But there were three premises that caused it to become so. One, Moshe acted because of the hardness of their hearts. Two, Moshe suffered you to obtain this certificate of divorce. And three, from the beginning, it was not so. All right. Now, I think the implication here is going to be an implication that is going to cause kind of a ripple, if you will, if anybody listens to it, in the world of Judaism. Because Judaism hangs its hat on the 613 mitzvot of Moshe. In other words, the 613 mitzvot count begins in Moshe and goes forward, assuming that there are no other mitzvot that appear in Genesis or that would appear in the book of Hanok or appear in the book of Jubilees, all very early writings. Well, Genesis most assuredly has other Torah mitzvot contained in it. And we're going to take a look at some of that, all right? Now let's take a look, for instance, on point with this discussion, what is found in Bereshith, or Genesis 2, verses 23-24. And the man said, This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. And therefore shall a man leave at his father and at his mother, and shall cleave to his woman, and they shall be one flesh. Okay, now this in of itself is a mitzvot. Okay, this is a mitzvot. And when we talk about the mitzvots of Yah, some of these truths are just inalienable or inevitable, if you will. For instance, we have the mitzvot, let there be light, or be light. Well, there most assuredly is light. That's a command. But you also have other mitzvot. You have the mitzvot of, and Yah set forth, or Elohim set forth the stars, the sun, and the moon to be for signs, appointed times, days, and years. Now that's a mitzvot. Okay, well, we'll get to that. All right. But if you consider the Torah as it is construed in the modern world, well, then you look primarily to Rabbi Moses ben Maimon, or Maimonides, as he's known, or the Rambam, and he is the one who is given credit for the codification of Talmudic law, the reduction of the oral Torah into writing. And the Rambam set out certain sets of beliefs of Judaism. Now, these are the 13 premises, if you will. 1, the existence of God. 2, God's unity and indivisibility into elements. 3, God's spirituality and incorporeality. 4, God's eternity. 5, God alone should be the object of worship. 6, revelation through God's prophets. 7, the preeminence of Moshe among the prophets. Important concept, because the preeminence of Moshe among the prophets would later translate to the preeminence of Muhammad among the prophets of Islam. You have the same kind of concept that one prophet is elevated, okay? And premise number 8 of Maimonides, or the Rambam, the Torah that we have today is the one dictated to Moshe by God. The Torah given by Moshe will not be replaced, and that nothing may be added or removed from it. Well, you know, again, if you're talking about what is the Torah, then you must read from Genesis 1:1 to the end of Devarim. God's awareness of all human actions and thoughts, reward of good and punishment of evil, the coming of the Jewish Messiah, and the resurrection of the dead. Okay, so these were the premises of Maimonides. All right. However, let's look at some of the first instructions. Now, a lot of people want to say that a mitzvot has to begin with thou shalt or thou shalt not, right? And so you have, it's just the edict and the subsequent concept. But let's take a look. There's more. For instance, as I mentioned before, Genesis 1:14 through 16. Be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs, for appointed feasts, for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens, or the expanse of the heavens, to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And Elohim made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. And he made the stars also. So here you have a Torah instruction. The Torah instruction is that your day is to be set by the sun, your night is to be set by the moon. And the sun and the moon and the stars together will establish your appointed feasts and will also give you signs. So if you have a calendar that is not based upon daylight and nighttime, well, then you're in breach of the Torah command. If you have appointed feasts that are scheduled randomly or arbitrarily that are outside the sun, the stars, and the moon, then you are in breach of the Torah, okay? And yes, the stars are to be used for signs in the heaven. So if you take a look, for instance, at Kizion, Revelation 13 or 12, 1 through 4, it starts out with this concept, and there appeared a great wonder in heaven. Well, the word wonder in Greek is this word semeion. And semeion is generally interpreted as an indication, especially ceremonial or supernatural, a miracle, a sign, a token, or a wonder. So it could be interpreted, and there appeared a great sign in heaven, a great sign in heaven, in which case the stars, the sun and the moon would contribute to that. All right, but now here is another mitzvah that appeared before Moshe. Genesis 1, verses 27-28. And Elohim created et man in his own image. In the image of he was he created. And Elohim created them male and female. And Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth. So you have a series here of mitzvah, or commands, that you are to be fruitful, and you are to multiply, and you are to replenish the earth, and you are to subdue it, and you are to have dominion over the fish, and over the fowl, and over all the living things on the earth. Well, those are commands. Those are Torah commands, okay? How about this? When you get to Bereshith, the Genesis 2:23 through 24, and the man said, this is now bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. She should be called woman because she was taken out of man. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother and shall cleave to his woman, and they shall be as one flesh. Okay, so there are several mitzvot in this command. 1, leave your mother and father. Premise number 1. 2, cleave to your spouse. 3, they shall be one flesh. And 4, it shall be man and a woman. Not to belabor that point, but that's a mitzvah. And anything else, of course, is breaching the mitzvah. So what we see here is we see Mashiach saying, in the beginning, it was not so. it begs the question as to how many other things in the beginning were not so. Well, we took a look at this writing in Psalm 46, which was also reflected in Ivrim, and I'm going to take a look at that again, that writing in the 10th chapter of Hebrews here in the 3rd edition of the Et Cefer. And we'll take a look at this. We're in chapter 10 of Hebrews, beginning in verse 5 and 6, and it reads, "Wherefore, when he came into the world, he said," quote, "In sacrifice and offering you would have no delight, but a body have you prepared me. In burnt offerings and sacrifices for sin you have had no pleasure." Well, let's go and take a look at what appears in Jeremiah. If you go to Jeremiah 7, again, you're going to have reiteration of the same kind of concept. All right? In Jeremiah 7, in verse 21, it says as follows, "Thus says Yahweh Sebaot, the Elohai of Yasharel, put your burnt offerings unto your sacrifices and eat the flesh. For I spoke not unto your fathers, nor commanded them in the day that I brought them out of the land of Mitzrayim concerning burnt offerings or sacrifices. But at this thing I commanded them, saying, Obey my voice, and I will be your Elohim, and you shall be my people. And walk ye in all the ways that I have commanded you, that it may be well unto you." So it begs the question, in the beginning, was burnt offering and sacrifice the condition? You know, if you look at the sacrifice of Yitzchak, Isaac, you see that Abraham was prepared to go forward with the sacrifice when the angel stayed his hand and said, "Harm not the boy." And that was it. That was the end of the sacrifice. He said, "You're done. Your test is over. Take Isaac, go home, bring him back to Sarah so she'll stop crying for a little bit." And because Sarah was going to lose her only heir. And a very dramatic and tragic story, which you can read the fullness of in the book of Yashar. But when you take a look at that sacrifice, the point is, whether it's the story is iterated in Yashar or in Genesis, the sacrifice came to an end. It came to an end. Don't touch him. You're done. Go home. And then Abraham is the one who said, "Well, let us sacrifice a ram." You see? And so people say, well, it was because of the hardness of the heart that Moshe gave the sacrifice of the Passover lamb. Well, that's not true at all either, because the sacrifice of the Passover lamb was given that the blood might be placed on the doorpost. Strike twice the doorpost with the blood of the lamb using the hyssop, that death might pass over you. And death was not an angel of death, it was Yahweh himself passing over the houses of Yasharel, who were marked, who had struck twice the doorpost with the blood of the lamb. But you see, you get this hardness of heart when it comes to the animal sacrifice system. Remember, Moshe went up the hill, went up Mount Sinai, and he got the 10 Commandments. And while he was up there receiving the Torah, the covenant of the 10 Devarim, and it is referred to as a covenant, that his brother Aaron is, down the hill making the golden calf. And he comes down the hill and he says, "Aaron, what are you doing?" And Aaron says, these people told me to make a golden calf for them." He was the one that was crafting the calf. If you recall, his 2 oldest sons died when they attempted the priesthood as well. But it was Aaron that was crafting the calf. And the people of Egypt, the people of Yasharel that had come out of Egypt, were they eating human flesh? It's a question. Was there human sacrifice going on in Egypt? The record appears to corroborate that human sacrifice was happening in Egypt and that the people were eating the flesh thereof. So once you acquire a taste for the flesh, maybe you don't mind the sacrifice of people. That is to say, when you can't stand to see the slaughter, but still you eat the meat, in the words of Tower of Power. Yeah, you have a very interesting situation there. So if you have acquired a taste for human flesh, do you mind that there is a slaughter of human beings going on? That this is part of the reason why Yah said, "You shall not put your infants in the fire," in worshiping Molech or Baal, as was the Canaanite practice, as was the practice in Egypt. And so if there was cannibalism and the house of Yasharel had in fact acquired a taste for the human flesh, and remember when they were in the desert, they got sick of the manna and they said, we want meat. Where's the beef? And so Yah provided them all the quail until it was coming out their nose, and people died from the eating of the quail. So when you see that kind of passage, then you realize that all of those people who had the taste of human flesh, none of them, save Joshua and Caleb, and who knows if they ever ate human flesh, none of them crossed over the Jordan into the Holy Land, but the whole of the generation died in the wilderness. The whole of the generation died in the wilderness. But in the meantime, burnt offerings and sacrifice were given to them as part of the system. Even though David tells you in Psalm 40.6, verse 6, I did not ask you to do burnt offerings and sacrifices. And that incense, the smoke of burnt offering means nothing to me, and it's reiterated in the book of Hebrews. Now, there's a quote that is given twice by Mashiach in the Gospels, and the quote is, haven't you read, I desire mercy, not sacrifice. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Even Solomon said the same thing. When he anointed the first temple, he said, this shall be a house of prayer for all nations. Now, we have a situation where the sacrifice system is on the verge of being reinstated with a third temple that is about to be reinstated in Jerusalem. And I say to you that in the beginning, it was not so. Thank you for your time, and I hope to see you again. Blessings and shalom.